Hey, Slapdawg! The Brainiacs are ready.
Welcome into Leather Brains. Your host here, Slapdawg, and today is November 8th, episode 145, and officially now the end of week 9 with week 10 on the horizon. I am not here alone. I have a very good friend here today. Of course, it's Wednesday, so welcome in, Yeti. It's great to have you here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys are all awake from that fucking snooze fest that we watched on Monday night.
Yikes.
What fest? Is that what we're calling it now, or what?
That was terrible. It was so boring and just unexciting, and I really truly flex it out. Like, I don't get it. Like, NFL just flex it out. Like, this game, we knew this game going into this game that it was going to be boring and terrible, and they decided to keep it in, and I'm like, why? Just flex it out.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Thursday night games and Sunday night games. It feels like they've all just been snoozers.
Yeah, they have. It's been terrible. So we'll talk about that here in just a moment, Yeti. And that's not all we're going to talk about. Today, we are going to be talking about the biggest surprises and disappointments so far this season. There's a little bit of both fantasy and NFL content. So for those that do not play fantasy, you should. But there's some NFL content here as well. We're going to play Flex Appeal. Of course, it's Wednesday. We got to get flexy, so we're going to do that. And then at the end of the episode, we are going to be answering people's questions, the Brainbusters. So if anybody has any questions, go over to our YouTube channel, hit subscribe. We do appreciate it. And then put your questions in the comment section, and we will answer them at the end of the show. Let's do it. Let's get into Monday Night Football, Yeti. Like we talked about, this was a snooze fest, but I want to start out with this. I'm going to, for those watching, I'm tipping my hat to Coach Robert Saleh. First and foremost, Yeti, that man has a delicious beard. He has got a good-looking beard, and I saw that and was like, damn, I did not know he could grow such a luscious and sexy-looking beard. So wanted to start there. I do think he's got a great beard.
So where does it rank compared to, like, Ryan Fitzpatrick's beard?
Oh,
I
they're
know
different
you have
beards.
a boner for Fitzpatrick,
Ryan Fitzmagic is the man. They're different beards. Robert Saleh's beard is a very professional beard.
It's
Ryan
sleek,
Fitzmagic, it's a good word for it, sleek. Ryan Fitzmagic is wily. It's crazy, and it's also really cool. So Ryan's a little bit longer, a little bit thicker, and a little bit crazier. Coach Saleh's is it's a little bit more tame, respectful, but still very luscious and sexy in its own way. So
kind of like my beard.
Very close to your beard, a little bit longer than your beard.
Yeah,
you keep yours pretty tight knit. His is a little bit longer, but still equally as delicious. So I wanted to shout out his beard, but I also just wanted to shout out Coach Saleh in general. I to be honest with you, Eddie, I actually got quite a bit of respect for him. I really do. I think he is a good coach, and I think that really what does it for me is that and this is almost kind of gross to say, he continues to defend Zach Wilson. Which, like, I don't think Zach Wilson's a good quarterback. I don't think Zach Wilson is the future of the Jets, and I don't think that the Jets organization or Coach Saleh believes that. But he repeatedly is constantly asked, why are you starting Zach Wilson? Why is Zach Wilson, like, what's going on with the quarterback situation? Today, there was an interview, and when I wrote this interview had not come out yet because it hadn't happened yet, but he did kind of stutter a little bit when they asked him, why do they not start Simeon? And he said he pleaded the fifth, I don't know, you got me. But he really hasn't talked a lot of crap on Zach Wilson. And I do respect that from a coaching perspective, because if he were to get up there and just say, we know Wilson sucks. Everybody knows that Wilson sucks. But for him to not actually say that, I think just holds a lot of credence to who he is and what his character is. And the fact that he's not going to go up there and bash one of his young players that they do need. They need Zach Wilson right now because they don't have Aaron Rodgers. And so he doesn't want to demoralize him anymore. And he knows, like, Zach Wilson's not stupid. He knows that he's not playing great. But my question is it not only the O-line's fault here? Like, can we not blame the O-line? I think Zach Wilson has taken steps from where he was last year in progression, but I think his O-line is so bad that there's also some troublesome areas there.
Yeah, I think you saw that very clearly on Monday night. He got sacked, 8 times? which is insane. Like no quarterback is going to perform under that kind of pressure. I mean, you look at Justin Herbert on the other side, or we'll talk about him here in a minute, but he got sacked 5 times and he didn't have a great game either. So there's only so much you can do as a quarterback when you have less than 2 seconds to throw the ball. And that's what Zach Wilson is dealing with, on top of the fact that he's not a good quarterback, nor is he an average quarterback. He's probably a backup in this league.
Yes.
That's all he should be at this point. So I feel bad for him, but
no, I do. But that's where he's at. But like I said, more than anything else, I do have some respect for Coach Salah in that regard, because he's not sitting up there bashing his quarterback. And I don't know if most head coaches maybe would, but very clearly, like, he's trying to protect him, and I think that's very admirable. So I just wanted to shout out Coach Law for that.
And they're in New York too, which is home of the media, so they're gonna get on Zach Wilson's ass every time he fucks up.
Sure,
social media's on his ass every time he messes up. So somebody's got to be the cheerleader in the background, and that's probably only Robert Salah at this point in the locker room.
Probably. Yeah. You talked about the Chargers offense, or you mentioned him, so let's talk about him. Herbert was held without a passing touchdown for just the 5th time in his 4-year career. So how much stock do you put in this performance tonight? On Monday night's game, because the Jets defense is a very good defense.
Yeah, I'm not putting too much stock into this performance. It is a little worrisome because Justin Herbert's dealing with a broken finger on his left hand, which he's playing football with one hand. Like, have you tried to play cards with one hand before? That's difficult. Now, I couldn't imagine having to run away from 300-pound guys and trying to throw a football with one hand. Like, the fuck? But not only is his hand an issue, but he was sacked 5 times, as I had mentioned. So it's not like he had a bunch of time to get the ball out. And once you get sacked a couple times, that internal clock is running, and it's bad news bears. But what I do want to talk about is this offense as a whole, the Chargers offense as a whole, because this is the 2nd year in a row where Justin Herbert has only had Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen, with Mike Williams missing time for various reasons, whether it's a hamstring or torn ACL or ribs or whatever the fuck he's dealing with. So Eckler turns into a PPR machine when Mike Will is out. But Austin Eckler, he's 29 years old. He doesn't have a contract. Keenan Allen, he's turning 32 years old next year. He's owed $23 million. $23 million. Mike Williams, he turns 30 years old next year, and he's due $20 million. So my question is, what do you think the future of this Chargers offense looks like?
We had this conversation last season, and I think I saw it before a lot of people did. And I don't say that to toot my own horn, but because it's been on my mind very frequently, and I'm concerned. I think you should be concerned. I was screaming from the rooftops, you need to sell Justin Herbert for dynasty purposes. You need to sell him while you still can. That was where I was at last year, and I was telling people you need to do that because this is going to implode at some point. It hasn't yet this year. We're starting to see it crumble, but I think it's on the horizon. I will say this. I was happy that the Chargers took a wide receiver in the 1st round because they desperately needed to. The issue that we're having is we really haven't seen Quentin Johnston super involved in this offense. Is it because of his talent? Is it because of the coaching? I don't know what it is. I would probably say talent more than anything else at this juncture, but that's concerning to me because you get a 1st round wide receiver. He's not even really on the field that much. He's starting to get more involved, mostly due to injury, but this last game was the most that he's been on the field at 83%, which is what I wanted to see 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's when Mike Williams went out with an injury, I wanted to see Quentin Johnston on the field 80% of the time. I wanted to see him get more involved, and he hasn't. And Joshua Palmer is probably a component of that because he effectively has now become the wide receiver too. He was hurt. That's why Quentin Johnston was on the field. Was he utilized this last week? No. He went 2 for 3 for 14 yards. I'm not excited about where this offense is going. You have a lot of aging assets on it, and to be honest with you, I'm not excited for the Chargers in the future unless they do a lot of acquisitions this offseason and a lot of moving of pieces to right that ship.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at who's going to be a free agent for next season, but like you had mentioned, they are going to need to do a complete overhaul of this offense if they want to succeed in the future, especially knowing guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have injury history. Like, I doubt they keep Mike Williams next year. I bet he's going to be a cap casualty, but Keenan Allen is probably, I think he's a Charger for life.
Sure.
Whether that means they restructure his contract or they just ride it out, but he's staying there. So knowing that, they need to go find a true wide receiver too, and I don't think they have that with Quentin Johnson. And I'm not just saying that because of half a season, but Quentin Johnson doesn't project to be that wide receiver one alpha in the offense. He's a vertical threat, and that's all he is. I look at him kind of like a Martavius Bryant, who just got signed by Dallas last week, but before that, he was floating around in the XFL and USFL, whatever. So I think they have a lot of big decisions to make this offseason if they want to succeed going forward.
For dynasty purposes, do you try and sell these guys before the trade deadline? I mean, is that where you're Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler? Austin Eckler is running back 26 on the season, which is a far cry from where you drafted him at.
Yeah, I think if I'm a contender, I would trade for Austin Eckler. And I say that knowing that he turns into a PPR machine when Mike Williams is out. And it's showing, the past 2 games, Austin Eckler has been healthy, but his receptions have gone up, and he is the offense at this point. When Keenan Allen is drawing double coverage, Austin Eckler is getting the check down. So I like Austin Eckler if you're a contender. If you're kind of in the middle, sell him for what you think is fair, right? At this point, like a late round first rounder probably sounds about fair, because it's not like Austin Eckler's 30 years old. He's up there in age, sure, but
for running back especially, wide receivers, we're starting to see some of these wide receivers still have relevance going into their 30s, but there's not many running backs that have a much tread left on their tires. So and the other part of this conversation is he's not going to be with the Chargers next year. So where's he going to go? Is he going to go to a worse home? Is he going to go to someone that is not going to throw him the ball? Which would be silly, because that's what you would get Austin Eckler for. But there's just a lot of moving pieces in this entire storyline that make me very scared for the Chargers, which kind of sucks, because if the Chargers made some of the right moves, I think they could certainly contend in this conference right now. The Raiders aren't good. Sorry. The Broncos are not good. And the Chiefs are the Chiefs. They're always going to be pretty good with Patrick Mahomes there. But like if they actually made some moves and did some of the right things, I think they could, especially this year, I think they could contend. They could have contended. So I don't know. The Chargers' future for me is starting to get a little scary. If I was a Chargers fan, I would be a little worried. I'm not going to hit the panic button, but I'm definitely, I see it over there out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, what are we doing here?
And I think this conversation is totally different if everybody's healthy, including Justin Herbert, because I think this year is probably the one of the few years that I've seen that the Chiefs have been gettable. And by gettable, I don't mean that they're slouches or anything, but the offense doesn't have as much firepower. So I know they still have Patrick Mahomes, but if you have a high power offense like the Chargers are supposed to at full strength, I think the Chargers could knock the Chiefs out. But at this point, that's a far cry.
You think Brandon Staley should be fired? You think they should move on from him? Is he part of this problem?
He certainly doesn't help the problem. I don't know if I get the hate for Brandon Staley. I truly do, with some of the boneheaded decisions that he's made. But if we look at Ron Rivera, he's called Riverboat Ron because he was making stupid decisions in his days with Carolina. So it's like, if that's the only reason we're firing Staley, then really? I want to say he's part of the problem. I'd say it's about 50-50. I think it's him, and I think it's a combination of injuries and the offense kind of just shit in the bed.
Okay. I don't think the play calling's been there, and I think most people, the thing that I don't like about it is I don't like the fact that they have a lot of talent on this roster and they're just not getting success. That to me screams a coaching issue. when you have and I understand the health has obviously played a very big part in all of this narrative, but there is so much talent on this roster, and they're not winning games that they should. And for me, I think the coach shares a large majority of that blame.
You think this is like a undefeated team if they have Dan Campbell at head coach?
Oh, easily. I think any team with Dan Campbell automatically gets a couple games in the win column just because they have him there. So
fair enough. Football guy.
Football guy. Oh, yeah. We got buys coming up, Yeti. And I'm not talking about NSYNC. I'm talking about football, baby. There is 4 teams and 4 very prominent fantasy teams that are on bye this week. So we've got the Chiefs, Eagles, Dolphins, and Rams. If you've heard me say any of those teams, they are on bye. Make sure to check your lineup. And for anybody who's in 15 fantasy leagues, like any of us here at Leatherbrains, you are changing all of your lineups. And I'm sure that almost everybody has at least one of these players on their roster. I certainly know that I do, and I have to move pieces around. So Chiefs, Eagles, Dolphins, and Rams are on bye this week. That really sucks, because that's a lot of fantasy output. So once again, the NFL screwing us over. I'm tired of these overseas games, and I'm tired of them putting a bunch of really good teams on bye at the same time because it affects everybody for fantasy football. I think it's bullshit.
Yeah, this just means you got to listen to our Flex Appeal segment towards the end of the show.
Bingo. Great sell there, Yeti. I love that. Let's talk about our biggest surprises and disappointments so far this season. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are halfway through the season officially now. Week 9 is over. So we are halfway through the regular season, and there are things that I think I would like to discuss, and I will start it out with Cooper Kupp. For fantasy football, what a disappointment Cooper Kupp has been. As a first-round pick, it has not looked good for him at all. He's wide receiver 55 on the year. He's struggled with injury. His quarterback is doing the same. Matthew Stafford, his hand is broken or something's going on with his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the beginning of the decline for Cooper Kupp, do you think? Like, for fantasy purposes, maybe, NFL, maybe he's going to be around for a few more years probably, but like, we've seen Puka Nacua come in, or Pookie Nuki, or whatever we're calling him these days, and he's been very efficient and very effective. He's young, he's talented, nobody saw this coming, and Cooper Kupp has struggled with injury. He came back and has still not looked like Cooper Kupp of the last 2 years, so is this the start of the end?
As far as fantasy relevancy, it's hard for me to write off Cooper Kupp just because of that relationship that he does have with Matthew Stafford and their cute little breakfast dates. I mean, I wish me and you could do that sometime.
Me too.
Go on a breakfast date. Like, that sounds
so
nice. Yeah, that'd be cute. But I'm not ready to hit the full panic button. I think it's fair to call him a big disappointment where we drafted him. But this offense is kind of shifting its gears a little bit. They found their guy in Kyron Williams, and when he was healthy, he was averaging over 16 touches a game. So not only is Cooper Kupp losing, targets at Puka Nacua, but Kyron Williams is getting more involved. They're slowing down the game a little bit with Kyron Williams running the ball. So this offense might be shifting from Cooper Kupp as our 300 target guy or 200 target guy to, okay, we are going to even this out a little bit. Let's get Kyron involved. Let's get our guy Puka involved now that he can make plays. So, Cooper Kupp is a fantasy disappointment from the perspective of a first round draft pick. Yeah,
I mean, like, just based upon, and everybody that plays fantasy football, it's what have you done for me lately? Mm-hmm. We've talked about that before. I think it's a narrative that everybody who plays this game certainly spins at one point or another. Let's spin it with Cooper Kupp right now. I mean, has he devolved to a third round pick next year? Is that like kind of where he's at for his production level? Because he's probably not a first rounder.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I would, I think that's
a late second, early third, maybe is kind of like, that's where I look at him. I'd be interested, and obviously we're going to figure this out next year when we go to redraft formats and are looking at ADPs, but just a very early look at it. I've been really disappointed with Cooper Kupp. And I think anybody who owns Cooper Kupp has been disappointed with Cooper Kupp, and you're not really getting any sort of relevant performance from him. And there's probably, maybe not this point in the season, but potentially some waiver wire people that are doing better than he is right now, So it sucks. And Puka Nacua is certainly, he's a much better own for the Rams wide receiver room right now than Cooper Kupp, or has been previously. So
Yeah, especially value-wise, right? Like, do you think Puka Nacua goes at the same time as Cooper Kupp next year?
I think, assuming Matthew Stafford is healthy, I think they're going to be pretty damn close to each other. I think that because you can't figure it out, right? I think if anything, Puka might, I think he could go before Kupp. I don't know, but I think it's going to I think what's really going to happen is how they end the season is going to determine a lot of that, with Matthew Stafford back on the field and seeing a target share, because realistically, we haven't seen all three of these people on the field for many games together. It's been a sprinkle of them. So I would like more of a sample size, and I think that's just, we're waiting for Matthew Stafford to get back to try and maybe decipher the code a little bit more. Either way, Cooper Kupp has been, I think I'm going to call him a bust this season.
That is completely fair at this point, yeah.
So sucks, but I wanted to talk about it because I was disappointed, and I wouldn't have seen this quick of a decline in him, and we've seen it this season. So,
yeah. And while you're disappointed in Cooper Kupp, I have a disappointment / a few surprises on my take here. So, I want to talk about Jacksonville, and when I say Jacksonville, I mean the whole offense. I think it's surprising / disappointing for a couple of different reasons. So my first reason is going to be the passing attack. Trevor Lawrence, at this current point in the season, he's a fantasy quarterback 17 behind Baker Mayfield, behind Russell Wilson, Jordan Love. And where you drafted Sunshine, you're hoping for a guy that's going to be in the top 10, especially with the way that this offense looked to finish off the season last year. So Trevor Lawrence, obviously, from a fantasy perspective, he's struggling. And obviously, in turn, that's probably going to affect some of the pass catchers on that team. So let's look at Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. This was a huge point of conversation that we had in the offseason. Calvin Ridley, he's going to be the wide receiver 1. We like him in the middle rounds. A lot of people drafted him in the 4th or 5th round, expecting Calvin Ridley to be the guy. He had that wide receiver 1 upside. But at this current point, Christian Kirk is actually outperforming Calvin Ridley. If you compare their stats, they are about the same, which is kind of surprising, right? Because Christian Kirk, he is a wide receiver 21 for PPR formats. Calvin Ridley is a wide receiver 42. But they're averaging the same targets. Their yards are only a few numbers away from each other. But what does it is the catches, right? The way that Christian Kirk is being used in this offense is Christian Kirk is a slot, and he's seeing all the easy, short passes underneath, whereas Calvin Ridley, he's averaging damn near 14 yards per target, which is, he's a vertical threat type of guy in this offense. So they're hurting quite a bit. Christian Kirk he's usable, right? He's a wide receiver 2 at this current point, so you're probably starting him happily. But you drafted him, 7th, 8th round, 4 or 5 rounds later than Calvin Ridley. So my hat's off to Calvin Ridley owners, because you have to be pretty disappointed in Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley at this point.
I was never buying this offense. And the only thing that I'm disappointed in is that I wasn't purchasing Travis Etienne, which I know we're going to talk about in a second. But I wasn't sold on Sarah Jessica Parker. I wasn't. I was never really excited to get any pieces of this offense. He looked great at the end of last year, but before that, it's kind of the same thing, but in the inverse of it is, what have you done for me lately? For me, it was, what have you done, period, in the NFL? And he had a couple good games at the end of the year, which kind of spiked his hot streak. And then a lot of people were excited because Calvin Ridley was coming back. Let's not forget, Calvin Ridley was a year and some change removed from playing football. So you have that as a little asterisk there for Calvin Ridley's usage. And then, like you mentioned, Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 1 this last season, and for fantasy, he's certainly the wide receiver 1 for the Jaguars. But why? You said it perfectly. He's being utilized in the slot. Trevor Lawrence is taking the easy throws, which is to be expected, but he's not bombing it far downfield. He is sometimes, and that's when Ridley is mostly effective, but it's not like he's doing those often. It's more to Christian Kirk, and it shows. So I was never super excited to draft anybody in this offense, Travis Etienne included. I'm shooting myself in the foot a little bit for that, and I'm sure that you are as well, because I think that we assumed that because they drafted Tank Bigsby that Etienne was going to start splitting a workload, and he's not. He's actually doing really well.
Yeah. Travis Etienne is, in my mind, the main reason why Trevor Lawrence and the pass catchers are kind of struggling this year, having a quote unquote down year. Travis Etienne, he's currently the running back 3 in fantasy formats or PPR formats. But he has a monster workload so far this season. The whole industry was basically saying Tank Bigsby is going to come in, including myself. Tank Bigsby is going to come in and he's going to take a 40% snap share. That's what I said. And I look stupid. So I apologize for anybody who listened to me. But last year, Travis Etienne, he had 13 carries per game. This year, it's up to 19 carries per game. And I'm not even talking about his receptions in that number either. So he's getting utilized in the passing game even more. Doug Peterson wasn't joking when he said that he wanted to utilize Etienne a little more, which I thought would just coach speak after Doug Peterson's track history of using a committee. So Travis Etienne, he's a workhorse back there, and he's a huge reason why this offense is disappointing from a pass catcher perspective. And one more thing is this team is playing with the lead more often. That means they don't have to throw the ball as much, whereas last year they were playing from behind quite a bit, more pass attempts, more benefits for the pass catchers. So,
yeah, I was on the same train that you were, right? I was on the I'm not touching ETN train because I believed that Tank Bigsby was going to play a part in it. You look at where his draft capital was, and it wasn't bad. You look at what Doug Peterson, old Dougie P, has historically done, as you mentioned, and it's typically had a split backfield. So you add all of these components together, and it's like there's no way that ETN's going to finish as a top 10 back when he's competing for touches, and that's we were wrong. And I think a lot of people who are fantasy analysts, such as ourselves, don't admit their faults and try and push them under the rug. And I think that you got to understand this. No matter who you listen to, nobody's right 100% of the time. And what we do here is we try and provide you with enough facts and enough statistics and enough argument behind a narrative for it to make sense. It doesn't mean it's going to. Right? We don't know. We're not in the locker room. We're not sitting there talking to the coaches and seeing the plays that they're going to call in the roster that they're going to use. But what we are doing is we're saying Doug Peterson hasn't used one running back before. They drafted Tank Bigsby pretty early. So the narrative is there for it. And that's what we bring to the table when we sit there and say, this is why I'm not drafting this guy. It doesn't mean that it's going to work out for us, but this is why. So I think that I just wanted to point that out because while you were wrong, while I was wrong, it doesn't mean that the narrative behind the why was wrong. It's just we were proven wrong because Doug Peterson's Doug Peterson and Travis Etienne is a really good football player.
Yeah, and since I admitted that I was wrong, I can admit I was right to something, and that was that I said Christian Kirk was going to outproduce Calvin Ridley, which so far he has. So shout out to me. 50%.
Well, you're 1-1 over there for the Jaguars, but let's talk about another running back that actually hasn't seen the field like ETN has, and that being Bijan Robinson. This is another disappointment. I brought two disappointments today, Eddie. I didn't bring a lot of surprises. It's just mostly sadness and despair. No, I want to really mellow everyone out. Yeah. Bijan Robinson is gloom and doom, and that's what his narrative has been all season long. He's not been nearly as involved as everybody thought he'd be, myself included. He was a first-round draft pick for not only the Falcons, but for fantasy football. He was, number 7 overall for the Falcons? Where in the hell is Bijan Robinson? You look at it from a team perspective. The Falcons are a run-first team. They have a really good offensive line. They run the ball very effectively. And then the Falcons draft a running back with the 7th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, one of the highest touted running backs in the last few years to enter the NFL. Where is he? They have a lot of weapons on this team. They have Kyle Pitts. They have Drake London. Their quarterback has been a problem. They have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. Like they have a lot going on in this team as far as potential. And I think a lot of it's Arthur Smith, man. Like that's where I'm at. I'm so disheartened to see Bijan Robinson passes the eye test. And I know that is not a statistical analysis, but that's what it is. He is a game-changing running back that could be a difference maker, and he is standing on the sideline while you have Jonnu Smith running sweeps to try and get a touchdown. That's poor coaching. That's all that is to me, and it's very disheartening. It's very disappointing, and I know that we joke around about coaches getting fired. I think Arthur Smith should be fired. Period. Because this is a disgrace what he's doing to Bijan Robinson and this team.
Yeah, and earlier you had talked about Brandon Staley probably needs to get fired for his lack of success with the roster that he has. Well, I think Arthur Smith can fall in that same category because this offense, if you look at all the pieces that they have that you just named off, minus the quarterback, this offense is bottom 10 in the NFL for scoring. But this should easily be like a top 5 offense in my mind when you consider the fact that they have one of the best offensive lines, one of the best running backs, and they have 2 elite pass catchers that are just not being utilized. And it doesn't make any sense as to why Arthur Smith still has a job at this point. And I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that they're in the NFC South, so they're still competitive, which is sad to say, but they're 4-4 at this point. They can still get a playoff. They can still win the division. So unfortunately, it's going to take like a major losing spell at this point to get Arthur Smith fired. And I never, want people to get fired, but for the benefit of some of the players on the Atlanta Falcons roster, I think I want him gone.
I think, but like I'm not sitting here rooting for anybody to lose their job, but like I think that at some point it's not I'm rooting for you to get fired, but I need to see change because you're not doing what you need to do to succeed, and that's where it's at with Arthur Smith. I don't understand. I really don't understand how you can't play Bijan Robinson. Tyler Algier out-touched Bijan Robinson this last week. I just don't understand it. I really don't. It is very disheartening, and I think if you're a Falcons fan, like I know Falcons fans are ready to be done with Arthur Smith, and I understandably so. I've seen other people like you mentioned who, like, especially on the Twitterverse, you get on Twitter or X now, and you see so many people. Like, we posted a tweet, and I said this on last episode, but we had posted a tweet about like which head coach is next on the chopping block after Josh McDaniels, and it was like I saw like Arthur Smith shouldn't be on here. He's winning the division, and it's like, look at the division, it's trash. And so yeah, while he's winning the division, if you took the Falcons team and put them on any other division in the NFL, they are not in first place. And now obviously they aren't because it's the Saints, but like, yes, they still have potential, but at the end of the day, Arthur Smith ain't getting it done. And that is very clear that it's not this team's fault. I think it's purely coaching.
Yeah. Yeah, and another big coaching decision that he's making is using Tyler Algier inside the red zone more than Bijan Robinson. You look at the touches that Algier is seeing in the red zone, he has 25 carries as opposed to Bijan's 9. And then we get closer to the goal line, Algier has 10 carries inside the 10, and Bijan Robinson, he has 2.
Stupid.
How does that make any sense?
It doesn't. It's
like trying to reason why Dan Campbell uses David Montgomery over Jahmyr Gibbs. You just can't reason it. It doesn't make any sense.
No, you're right. The only difference is the Lions are still winning games, and
right.
Like I think that's the narrative. Like if the Falcons were still winning these games and like their offense looked explosive like the Lions do, you can't sit there and yell at Dan Campbell for not using Jahmyr Gibbs, because at the end of the day, they're not playing fantasy football. They're playing NFL football, and they're here to win. But the Falcons aren't doing that either. So that's what I just don't understand. I don't know. Arthur Smith's dad is the founder of FedEx. So maybe that's why he got the job, is because his dad bought it for him. I don't know. I'm spitballing, and we'll see what sticks. But I think it's time for Arthur Smith to move on. I think it's time for the Falcons to move on from Arthur Smith.
What do you think it takes to get it done? because you would think losing to a quarterback who's only been with the team for 2 or 3 days would get you fired.
I thought it was.
But I guess that's not a deciding factor. Like, do they have to go on like a 3 or 4 game losing skid to even consider firing him?
I don't know why they haven't. And truthfully, I don't know. Why have you not gotten rid of this guy? We as fans can see it. We as analysts or watchers of the NFL know that this Falcons team has a lot better roster than what they're currently doing right now. So what gives? Take another coach, throw him in there, and I bet they find more success. Because take most NFL. We'll say 2/3 of NFL coaches can find more success with the Falcons than Arthur Smith is currently doing. So I just wanted to go on that rant a little bit. I feel bad for Bijan Robinson owners for fantasy football because he was drafted a later first-round pick for redraft formats. He was supposed to be the next Saquon Barkley or the next Christian McCaffrey or the next bell cow tough ass between the tackles getting you 15 to 20 fantasy points a game running back, and he hasn't done any of it. And it's not his fault. So it sucks.
Yeah. It's like playing a game of Where's Waldo.
It is. So where's Bijan? All right, that's it. I'm going to get off my rant here because I could do this all day.
Yeah, we're going to get happy now. All right,
let's do it.
We're going to go from a young, promising guy to an old guy named
This makes me
Adam
sad, too.
Thielen. Ooh, I think this is one of everybody's biggest misses. Like, if you were to tell me that Adam Thielen would be a wide receiver 10 or a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy leagues at the beginning of the season, I probably would have slapped you. Like, I'm curious how much money you would have made if you had put a bet that Adam Thielen was a top 10 wide receiver. Because I know you can bet on that type of shit.
No, you can. We'd have to go look at like old lines and stuff. I'm sad. I'm so sad by this because I owned Adam Thielen I drafted him late round and then I dropped him for, I think it was Kyron Williams. So like I couldn't be too angry, but like I'm still pretty disappointed because I had a top 10 wide receiver, let him go to waivers, and then he was picked up and obviously he's exploded.
Yeah. And I think his offseason signing wasn't very flashy, with Carolina, and we all kind of wrote him off just like we did with Geno Smith and Hopkins a couple weeks ago. But perhaps we didn't really consider his potential passive fantasy success in this offense. You look at this offense, they had drafted Bryce Young and they had signed Adam Thielen, DJ Shark, and Hayden Hurst. Out of those 3 guys, we should have known that Adam Thielen was probably the most talented guy out of the group. Sure. And so where I'm getting at with this is Adam Thielen is the most talented guy, so he's going to get peppered with targets with a young quarterback like Bryce Young. So my question to you, Slaps, just for something that we can keep in our back pocket, do you think this is a lesson that we need to remember for next season? Not to write off some of these older wide receivers that may go to young or teams with young quarterbacks. We look at Drake May next year and Caleb Williams. What if they go to a team that, is kind of similar to the Panthers and they make some signings in the offseason?
I can't think of a worse team than the Panthers, though. Maybe the Patriots, for an offensive landing spot for a quarterback.
Yeah.
The Panthers are bad, and the Panthers have a bad offensive roster, and they do. We can sit here and talk about Adam Thielen and how good he is for fantasy this year, and he is. But you look at this roster and you're like, this is disgusting. You have this rookie quarterback with a bunch of trash, like these old assets that really were just kind of deadbeats or trending towards deadbeats in the NFL that are like roster filler guys. And they're like, well, we'll sign him. We'll take him because we don't have anything. So I don't know. You talk about a Drake May or a Caleb Williams. What worse spot is there for Bryce Young to lay? What worse spot is there than the Panthers? I don't think there is one. So I see where you're coming from. I think for me, there's a couple different narratives here. I really thought that this team was going to utilize Miles Sanders in a more favorable fashion. I think most people probably did. I expected their run game to be a little bit better. We saw Deontay Foreman last year with them, as well as the other running back whose name is currently escaping me. And they were running the ball. when they traded Christian McCaffrey, they were still running the ball. Those guys found fantasy usage, and I thought, man, Miles Sanders is going to still be fine. Miles Sanders going over here is going to be fine. He hasn't been great. He's been pretty lackluster, to say the least. And I also probably put a little bit too much stock in Jonathan Mingo, their wide receiver rookie that they drafted this year. He's on the field a lot, but he really isn't usable for fantasy football at this point. Maybe that changes down the road. You know, as he gets more comfortable in the NFL and Bryce Young gets more comfortable and this team gets hopefully a little bit better in the next couple of years, maybe that changes. But right now, that's not the case. And so you talk about Adam Thielen and his resurgence. Adam Thielen has been great, but let's not forget Adam Thielen was just a really good wide receiver for a very long time with the Vikings. So the only reason the Vikings moved on from him is because he was an aging asset, and they wanted to bring in some youth and some some new young talent there versus
some fresh blood.
Exactly, so some fresh legs, something new, and something that is going to be a future look for their franchise versus keeping an old wide receiver around. So Adam Thielen was still good. That was never in question. It was just a matter of, can Bryce Young get him the ball? And I think that's kind of the narrative. Bryce Young is able to get him the ball for fantasy purposes, but that doesn't mean the Carolina Panthers are any better.
Yeah, all 5'10" of Bryce Young is getting him the ball.
So like I said, this makes me sad because I kind of saw that just a thought. I was like, a late round flyer for Adam Thielen. Why the hell not? Why not? So I did it, and I dropped him after week 1 because at the beginning of the season, you have to dig through the waiver wire and try and find that value. And I was like, well, Adam Thielen, he only got 2 targets in week 1. This isn't going to be it for him. He's 33 years old. This team's going to be just as bad as I thought it was, and he's not going to be usable. I'll drop him for another guy. And like I said, I think it was Kyron Williams. I'm not too sure. And so I did. So I let him go. And it haunts me to this day because he's wide receiver 9 on the season, and I let him free. But I don't know. The Panthers, I don't think Panthers are just an organization where you look at them and you're like, dude, they're going nowhere fast.
Yeah. And you asked what teams are in a worse position that would get like Drake May or Caleb Williams. The Patriots need a quarterback. The Cardinals maybe need a quarterback. The Raiders might need a quarterback. The Falcons need a quarterback. The Bears do. But they're those 5 teams, they all have a wide receiver 1 at this current point. Even like Green Bay, if they get rid of Jordan Love, I would take those wide receivers over what the Panthers have in a heartbeat.
Not even, yes, the wide receivers, of course, but just the team in general is just in a better position. I think that the Panthers are just in a bad, ugly, nasty spot. I really do think that. So I don't know, man. I think it's certainly good to keep an eye on, but it's more narrative based than anything else, and perhaps that's the key here is don't just grab an old vet that gets paired with a rookie, but look at the entire story here before you do that. It's kind of my mentality anyway.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, hey, I appreciate you bringing some surprises and disappointments to the table. This was fun, but it's time to play Flex Appeal, baby. So why don't you kick us off?
Alrighty, baby. Let's get flexy here. My first Flex Appeal of week 10. Ooh, it kind of feels gross saying week 10, man.
I know, we're in the double digits. It kind of makes me cringe a little. It makes me sad. Makes me very sad.
You're just full of sadness on this podcast.
I know.
Let's get flexy, baby. Deontay Johnson versus Green Bay or Tank Dell versus Cincinnati.
I want to say Tank Dell because the Bengals don't really have a great pass defense. But Deontay Johnson came back from injury and was looking pretty spicy. I mean, he went 7 for 9 for 90 yards and a tutty against Tennessee this last week. So I think it's got to be Deontay Johnson for me. I understand that Cincinnati has a worse passing defense than the Packers, but what I like about Deontay Johnson is how much he gets peppered by Kenny Pickett. When he is on the field, he gets a lot of volume, and Deontay Johnson is still a talented wide receiver, so he's the wide receiver 1 for the Steelers team. I'm going to take Deontay Johnson in this one.
Yeah, this one was kind of hard for me. I lean Deontay Johnson just because he's a ball hog. That's what he is in this offense. And can we talk about George Pickens for a second? Because I want to talk about his reaction to Deontay Johnson getting the touchdown. Like, what a shitty fucking teammate.
What did he do?
I'm sorry. But like, so Deontay Johnson, he catches his first touchdown in like 50 years, right? And George Pickens immediately goes to the sideline and like slams his helmet, and he's just like on the bench, like looking disappointed because he didn't get a touchdown. Whereas Deontay Johnson, you know, he's all happy and he's dancing on the sideline. Like George Pickens isn't hyping his boy up. He's just sitting there on the sideline. Yeah.
Well, Deontay Johnson hadn't gotten a touchdown since the Big Ben era. This was his first one. So that's pretty shitty. That's a terrible teammate. I would be very upset. I might need to go find this clip, and that's poor sportsmanship.
Browse it. Yeah, for sure. So, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to go on that little vent for a second because it's been lingering down deep.
That makes me mad.
Right.
Like, this is a team sport. This isn't a, well, fuck him. He got the touchdown and I didn't.
Yeah.
Maybe get some separation, George Pickens, and then you might get the ball a couple times.
Yep. Yeah.
That's disgusting.
It is pretty bad. But going back to the question, I think I am going to go with Tank Dell for the upside here. And the reason is Cincinnati is more of a pass funnel defense. Cincinnati's been stopping the run. The past 3 weeks, they're only allowing 49 yards to running backs. So if Houston wants a chance to win this game, and that Houston's going to be without, God, what's his name? Not Singletary. I can't think of their starter right now. But they're without their starting running back. God, I'm sorry. I feel like a terrible analyst.
You talking to Dameon Pierce?
Yeah, Dameon Pierce. There we go. He's going to be out this week again. And they're going to have to throw the ball again to have a chance to win this game. So give me Tank Dell for upside.
Do you think Tank Dell is comparable to Gabe Davis as far as fantasy football output?
Oh, no, because he catches the ball.
Yeah, but the problem is him getting targets. 4, 10, 7, 3, 4, injured by 4, 11.
I think the problem with Tank Dell right now is that Nico Collins is there. Yeah. And Nico Collins is the wide receiver 1. So it's just kind of matchup dependent for Tank Dell. And I think he is going to feast this week with Nico Collins drawing more of the coverage from Cincinnati's top DB.
Okay, I propose this question to you then. Jerry Jeudy versus the Bills or Hollywood Brown against the Falcons with a returning Kyler Murray.
I don't even want to consider Jerry Jeudy, man. So it's Hollywood for me, and it's very easy. It's very easy because K1 is officially back, and I am all on the hype train this week. Hollywood Brown last year, when him and Kyler Murray were on the field, Hollywood averaged 18 fantasy points per game with 10 targets and 71 yards. Hollywood Brown was a wide receiver 7 at this point until D-Hop came back. I'm riding with Hollywood, man. If you have Hollywood, this is what you've been waiting for all season.
Amen.
Start him up.
Yep. No, I love it. I think the biggest concern, obviously, is K1 going to be healthy enough to get it done? I think he is. Obviously, if they're rolling him out into the field, I think he's going to be ready to go, and Hollywood Brown is the target. So I'm excited for Hollywood Brown. I own him in a league, and I set and forget, and I am excited to see what happens for him. But as you mentioned, with DeAndre Hopkins gone on the field when Hollywood Brown was the wide receiver 1 for this team and K1 was on the field, he was a top 10 wide receiver, like season long for the first 6 weeks. I want to say he was wide receiver 5 or 6. So like the numbers support it. Let's just see if he can get it done. I'm also taking Hollywood in this one.
Can I ask you if you're excited as a Cardinals fan?
Yeah.
Are you excited for this week?
Here's, there was a tweet posted on the Leatherbrains account if people would rather have Justin Fields or Kyler Murray. A lot of people said Justin Fields. Some people said Kyler Murray. I'm going to say this. I'm in on Kyler Murray. I think I have to be as a fan. What's the alternative? I think that Kyler Murray, for me as a Cardinals fan, is someone that I think, and I hope he did a lot of growing up in his injury. I hope he did a lot of soul searching. I don't think it was probably great for his mentality, but I think it was needed for his mentality to get hurt and see what people were saying about him. I think a lot of people are writing him off, and I think a lot of people are saying, let's move on from him. Let's get him out of here. And the hope with it is that he wants to go in and prove people wrong, and he wants to go show that he is all that in a bag of chips. Is probably what all the old people say. I'm in on him. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to come out. I think he's going to show that he wants to be a part of this franchise, and he wants to stick around, and he wants to prove himself. So that, as a fan, I think that's kind of where the pillar I have to stand on. But mentally, that's where I'm at, and I'm going to support Kyler Murray.
I love it.
Thank you.
It's like a fresh a breath of fresh air here in the podcast.
Yeah.
Last week for me it was Josh McDaniels getting fired. This week for you, it's Kyler Murray coming back.
Nowhere to go but up, baby.
We're back, baby.
We're back, baby.
All right. Back to Flex Appeal Slaps. I have a nasty-ish question for you. So, Garrett Wilson versus the Raiders with a nice matchup, or Gus Edwards, who kind of blew up last week, versus Cleveland.
You picked some difficult. These are difficult because the Raiders actually don't have a terrible pass defense, but the Browns have probably the best defense in the NFL, to be honest with you. So yeah. I think I'm going to take Garrett Wilson. I have too much respect for Myles Garrett. I think he probably deserves Defensive Player of the Year. He is a scary man. He's my favorite defensive player in the NFL. And this defense in totality is a very good defense. I can tell you this. I'm excited for that game. I'm so excited. This is probably the game of the week for me because the Browns are hot. The Ravens are even hotter, and I think this is going to be a really interesting showcase for them. So I'm going to take Garrett Wilson. I think just given the matchup, I think the Browns are going to stuff the run quite frequently, and I think that the Jets are going to want to win this game against the Raiders, who are very lackluster, and so I think that Garrett Wilson is going to see the ball quite a few times. I'm going to take Wilson on this one.
Well, I don't agree that the Raiders are lackluster, but I agree with your decision.
Thank you. I will say this, and I want to pick your brain on this very quickly as we're talking about both of our teams here. I have my feelings towards it, but what did you think about the Raiders coming out with their new head coach? He brought all the practice squad players onto the field. It seems like he's really encapsulated this entire team in a good, positive way. So, as a Raiders fan, what are you thinking of the interim head coach?
1 week in, I love it. I think what we saw with Josh McDaniels was he tried to bring the Patriot way to the Raiders when the Raiders already have an identity. If you look at this team going back to the 60s, this team was a nasty, physical, violent team. They didn't give a fuck, and that's how the Raiders are. Josh McDaniels, he tried to bring the Patriot way, which is a professional way of bullshit, basically. He tried to change an identity overnight. That just didn't work. But you have a guy like Damian Pierce Antonio Pierce.
There you go.
There we go.
Like, that's a running back for the Texans.
Yep. He understands the culture. He understands what the Raiders are about, and he knows that he needs to bring that energy. And all the press conferences that I've seen with him, he's brought it. And he knows that it takes a team to win, to have success, and that includes the practice squad guys. That includes the janitors. So he gets it. I love it. From 1 week in, I think it's a great move at this point. If he keeps on winning, I hope he gets a job. But if he doesn't win, unfortunately, that's the name of the game. That's how you're kind of judged.
Yeah. My heart just freaking ripped open when I found out, like when he had that little press conference and they asked him why he had the practice players out there. I was just like, that's a guy who gets it. That's a guy who didn't let the moment of him becoming in charge get to be too big. I succeeded. I got to be the interim head coach, and I'm going to bring these players with me because they deserve it, and they are a part of this organization and a part of this team, and they deserve to be showcased in that way and see what it's like, see what the game day is like. It's like bringing the JV guys into the varsity game for high school football, and they're not going to play, but they're going to suit up, and they're going to sit there, and they're going to watch and support and cheer, and then they're also going to say, I want to be out there, so what do I need to do to push myself harder? I thought it was just such a cool little thing that he did, and it made he earned a lot of respect from a guy who is not a Raiders fan. So I just had to ask you that because I thought it was a really, really cool thing. So you're also taking Garrett Wilson?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm taking Garrett Wilson. Yep.
Okay. Well, then let me ask you this. Alexander Madison versus the Saints. or Rachaad White versus the Titans?
My decision here might surprise you a little bit. I'm going with Rachaad White.
Wow.
So Tennessee is notoriously a run-stopping defense, right? But actually, over the last 3 weeks, they've allowed 111 yards to running backs, which is the third most in the league. You look at last week, Najee Harris, inefficient Najee Harris. He had 69 yards on 16 carries. Nice. And then
Nice.
Jalen Warren had 88 yards on 11 carries. So they got it done on the ground. Rachaad White is coming off a huge game last week, and I think they're going to continue to feed him, whether it's on the ground or through the air. So I'm rolling with Rachaad White.
Okay. That is not what I thought you were going to say. I know that you are not really a White supporter. I have a question for you. Does Alexander Madison without Cam Akers, like, he's now pretty much solidified himself as the RB1 again for this team. So does that make you a little bit more, obviously we don't root for injury, and I'm very sad to hear about Cam Akers' Achilles again, but does, for fantasy purposes, Alexander Madison become a little bit more appealing for you?
A little bit, but I think my main concerns with this offense is that the volume isn't there for a running back to succeed. If you look at what they're doing, everything is through the air. And I think last week they needed Madison because they had a rookie quarterback until Josh Dobbs went in. And then I think they still needed Alexander Madison. But now that Josh Dobbs has a week under his belt, I think they might open it up a little bit more for him to throw the ball.
Do you think that we still might see more of a shift to a little bit more of a run game just to try and even out the field without Kirk Cousins back there?
I don't think they'll need to with Dobbs, man. I think as he gets more comfortable with his playbook, they're just going to let him loose like they did with Kirk Cousins.
The Pastronaut, baby. I'm going to take Madison on this one. The Saints don't... I hear what you're saying. Rachaad White's not a very efficient running back either. So it makes it really hard. You know what? I'll take Rachaad White. You've convinced me. You look at, like, he is the only competition in this running back room, and he is involved in the passing game quite a bit still. And I'll take Rachaad White. You've convinced me. We'll do Rachaad White versus the Titans.
Welcome to the dark side, baby.
Ugh. Gross.
All right, my last flex appeal slaps. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready, baby.
Jahan Dotson versus Seattle, or Chris Godwin versus Tennessee. What are you gonna do?
You're the only 10 I see, baby.
Hey yo,
This is gross. This is gross, Yeti. Why'd you do this to me? I think a part of... I'm going to take Jahan Dotson. I'm going to take Jahan Dotson because while he has been largely inefficient in fantasy football, his volume is still there. His volume pretty much most of the season has always been there. The problem is he just hasn't caught them, and I don't think those are all his fault. I think part of that is the quarterback's fault or the offense's fault in general. But Jahan Dotson is seeing great usage. He just isn't for NFL efficiency, but he's not for fantasy football. But he's starting to. And I think that could be, I don't want to say it's I don't want to say that it's going to be the end of it and this was just a 2-week span, but he put up 20 points and 14 points these last 2 games. So I'm going to take Jahan Dotson. Seattle's defense is also a little bit worse in the passing game than Tennessee's is. And Chris Godwin has been a little lackluster this season as well. So he still sees, I would say they probably see similar target volume. I think Chris Godwin's is a little bit better, but Tennessee's defense passing is also a little bit better as well.
So I was torn on this one myself, but I think what really did it for me is the fact that Curtis Samuel is coming back this week. He's been out the past 2 weeks, and when Curtis Samuel's on the field, he's kind of their gadget guy there in Washington, and they try to get him the ball as much as possible. So if he's ready to come back and if he's going to play a full snap share, I think Dotson is the one that is unfortunately hurt by that. So I'm gonna roll with Chris Godwin, and I'm gonna take the safety net of those 10 to 12 PPR points that he's been averaging so far this season.
Okay. Last one here, and we'll get out of here. We talked about Christian Kirk a little bit earlier, so we had to bring him to the table. Christian Kirk versus the Niners, or Joshua Downs versus the Patriots.
Yeah, I think both of these guys have a clear path to success this week. They both have cupcake matchups, but I think the game script tends to favor Christian Kirk this week. I think what the 49ers are going to do against Jacksonville is stop the run and then make Sunshine throw the ball. And if that's the case, the 49ers haven't been that great against stopping the pass. We like to say this defense is elite, but their secondary has been far from elite so far this season. So I think more volume for Christian Kirk this week in a game where they're going to have to throw the ball. I love Christian Kirk over Joshua Downs this week.
I would agree with you for everything you just said. I think that, ETN, as we talked about earlier in the show, ETN is eaten. He is the guy for them. And so 49ers are going to stop that. And the way to beat the 49ers is pass on them. So I think that's what the 49ers are going to continue to do. And Christian Kirk is wide receiver 1 for this team. Sign me up. That's it, Yeti. That's all the time we got, baby. There's no Brainbusters on today's episode, so there's no questions. But if anybody has any questions in the future, go follow us over at YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and put your comments in, and we'll answer them at the end of the show. So we appreciate everybody's continued support. Best of luck in Week 10 for fantasy football. I love you guys, and we
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.